Okay, so you guys sent us a really interesting piece about the metaverse and cryptocurrency and NFTs. And what really caught my eye about this one was it was written to explain these like pretty complex ideas in a way that even a 10-year-old could understand.
Yeah, it definitely takes a unique approach trying to make these often very technical concepts accessible to a much younger audience, which I think is pretty cool.
So I think for our deep dive today, what we should do is use this like really clear, accessible explanation as a jumping off point to kind of dig into the core concepts and really see how they all connect so that you can walk away with like a solid understanding of this whole digital frontier.
I think that's a great idea because it allows us to not just like reiterate the basics, but really dissect what makes these simplified explanations work and like how they eliminate the bigger picture.
So should we start with the metaverse?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so the metaverse, the source describes it as like this super fun virtual world where you can play games and hang out with friends and basically create anything you can imagine.
It really emphasizes that immersive aspect, right? Like
Yeah.
being able to step into this digital space and experience it in a way that goes beyond like just watching a screen.
But it also makes it really clear that it's more than just a game, right? It's
Uh-huh.
like this persistent digital space where
Yeah.
you can do all sorts of things like shop or go to virtual classes, like this whole other world you can live in.
Yeah. And what I found insightful was how it connected the idea of the metaverse to consumers.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you need people who are going to be like participating in this virtual world.
Yeah, exactly. Like people who are going to buy things and engage with the experiences being offered. And that's where the whole concept of the economy comes in.
Right. And that brings us to cryptocurrency.
Perfect segue.
So the source describes cryptocurrency as basically digital money that lives on the internet, which sounds pretty straightforward, but how does that actually work? Like,
Yeah.
how do you use it?
Well, the source uses this really great example to illustrate it. Imagine you're in the metaverse and you want to buy a cool new outfit for your avatar. Well, you can use cryptocurrency to do that, just like you'd use regular money in a store.
Okay, so it's like the currency of this virtual world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It allows you to buy virtual items and experiences within the metaverse.
Makes sense. But here's a question that came to mind when I was reading this. Do you always have to like exchange cryptocurrency for real money, like dollars or euros or whatever?
That's a really important point, and the source actually addresses that directly. It says that within the metaverse, you don't necessarily have to convert your cryptocurrency back to traditional money.
Mm.
It has its own value and can be used for transactions within that ecosystem.
So it's like its own self-contained economy.
Precisely, and that's a really powerful concept to grasp because it suggests the possibility of these entirely digital economies operating with their own currencies and systems of value.
Wow. So the source then goes on to talk about different types of cryptocurrency like Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Yeah, it starts with Bitcoin, which it describes as the first and most famous cryptocurrency,
And they compare it to treasure in a video game.
which I think is a clever analogy because it immediately makes you think of something valuable and maybe even a bit scarce.
I like that treasure analogy. It gives it a certain mystique.
Right, and then it introduces Ethereum, which it describes as another cool coin that could be used to do special things in the metaverse.
Okay, so it sounds like Ethereum has a more like functional role within the metaverse.
Yeah, it suggests that different cryptocurrencies might serve different purposes within these digital spaces, with some being more like digital assets and others being more focused on enabling specific actions or transactions.
So we've got the virtual world and we've got the digital money. What's next?
Well, now we get to the really fascinating part, NFTs.
Okay, so NFTs are non-fungible tokens, and the source describes them as unique digital stickers or trading cards.
And that emphasis on unique is crucial because it highlights what makes NFTs so different from other digital assets.
Right, like
Yeah.
if you have a digital image, you can just copy and paste it a million times. But with an NFT, you have the only one.
Exactly. It introduces this concept of digital scarcity, which is pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah, because normally anything digital can be duplicated infinitely, but with NFTs, it's like owning a one-of-a-kind original.
And the source makes it really clear that NFTs are bought and sold using cryptocurrency, tying it back to that concept of a digital economy we talked about earlier.
It's all starting to come together.
All right, it's a whole interconnected ecosystem. And to illustrate how NFTs actually work, the source uses the example of artists selling their digital artwork as NFTs.
Which makes sense because art is something that people are used to thinking of as like a unique and valuable thing.
Right, and by selling it as an NFT, the artist is essentially giving the buyer proof of ownership of that specific piece of digital art.
So it's like having a digital certificate of authenticity.
Exactly. And that idea of provable ownership is huge because it opens up all sorts of possibilities for how we think about and use digital assets.
But it's not just about digital art, right? The source also talks about NFTs being used for things in real life.
Yes, this is where things get even more interesting. The example they use is concert ticket NFTs.
So instead of having a paper ticket or a digital ticket on your phone, you have an NFT that proves you have the right to attend the concert.
Exactly. And that highlights how NFTs can move beyond the digital realm and actually have tangible real-world applications.
Which raises the question, how else could we use NFTs in our daily lives?
That's the exciting part. We're only just scratching the surface of what's possible.
So with all this talk about virtual worlds and digital economies, how does all of this impact, like, the real world economy?
Right. The source explains that the economy is basically a system where people trade and use resources to create goods and services.
Right, and it compares it to a big playground where everyone is trading and playing together using money and resources.
Which is a really helpful analogy for understanding how economies work.
So how does the metaverse fit into all of this?
Well, the source points out that the metaverse is already having an impact on the economy by creating new jobs.
Like what kind of jobs?
Well, it specifically mentions game creators and virtual designers as examples.
Okay, so people are actually making a living by building and creating things in the metaverse.
Yes, and that's a significant shift because it shows how these digital spaces can generate real-world economic opportunities.
And the source uses another great analogy to illustrate this. It compares the economic activity within the metaverse to a bustling toy store.
I love that analogy because it really captures the sense of energy and excitement surrounding this whole digital economy.
Right, it's like this virtual marketplace where people are constantly buying and selling goods and services, which in turn drives innovation and creates even more opportunities.
It's a fascinating cycle to consider, and it's still very early days.
So before we wrap up, let's take a look at the key benefits that the source highlights, because I think that brings it all together.
That's good.
Okay, so first up, we have creativity. The source emphasizes how the metaverse allows users to create their own games and art and even entire experiences.
It's like a limitless digital canvas for imagination and innovation.
Exactly. And then there's the idea of a global community. The metaverse connects people from all over the world in these shared virtual spaces.
Yeah, it breaks down geographical barriers and allows for a level of interaction and collaboration that's pretty amazing.
And finally, we have ownership with cryptocurrency, and NFTs users have true ownership of their digital assets.
Which is a fundamental shift from traditional online platforms where you often don't actually own the things you buy or create.
So it's like empowering users to have control over their digital lives.
Exactly, and that can lead to a much more engaged and invested user base.
So as we start to wrap up our deep dive into this source material, let's just quickly recap the key takeaways.
Great idea.
So the metaverse is this immersive virtual world where you can play games, socialize, and create just about anything.
And cryptocurrency is the digital money that makes all of that possible.
Right, it's the currency of the metaverse.
And NFTs are these unique digital assets that can represent ownership of everything from virtual art to real-world tickets.
And the crucial takeaway here is that all of these elements are interconnected. They work together to create this dynamic and ever-evolving digital ecosystem.
It's not just about separate technologies, it's about the way they interact and create entirely new possibilities.
This has been a really eye-opening look at these complex topics, and what I appreciate about this source is that it manages to break them down in a way that's engaging and easy to understand, even for someone who's completely new to all of this.
I agree. It provides a really solid foundation for understanding this rapidly evolving digital landscape.
And it definitely leaves us with a lot to think about, especially when you consider the vast potential of these technologies.
Absolutely. And speaking of things to think about, the source has a questions time section at the end that poses some really thought-provoking questions.
Oh yeah, I like that part.
So building on that, here's a final thought for our listeners.
Hit us with it.
Considering all the possibilities we've discussed today, which aspect of this digital frontier do you find most compelling? Is it the immersive worlds, the new forms of digital currency, or the unique ownership of digital items, and why?
That's a great question to ponder as we all continue to navigate and shape this exciting new digital landscape.
Definitely food for thought.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll